For 10 years, I was the most devoted follower in Isabella Ashworth's orbit. I took her from total obscurity and helped shape her into a world-renowned concert pianist. But just as she reached the pinnacle of her fame, I chose to walk away. Everyone called me a fool. Only I knew that it was time for this secret, decade-long love to finally end. Later, a video from the star pianist's engagement party went viral. Isabella, her eyes red with tears, was tearing the world apart to find me. Her million-dollar couture wedding dress lay in tatters at her feet. When I handed in my resignation, Isabella's long fingers paused on the piano keys. She turned to face me, her beautiful eyes filled with a hint of confusion. Why? Standing by the studio's floor-to-ceiling windows, I fought to keep my voice steady. Ms. Ashworth, I'm not getting any younger. It's time for me to settle down. After a brief pause, I added, my relatives back home recently set me up with someone suitable. It was a harmless lie, crafted for the sole purpose of making a clean break. Isabella's fingers tapped restlessly on the keys, a nervous habit of hers. A few stray notes echoed through the studio like fragments of an unspoken thought. Seeing her subtle agitation brought me a pang of bittersweet satisfaction. After a long silence, Isabella placed the resignation papers on the piano. I can give you time off, she said. I want you to reconsider leaving. In that instant, my resolve wavered. A voice whispered, tempting me, stay, just stay, and you can always be by her side. But logic screamed back, Davis, she's getting engaged to Ethan Hamilton. Pining for a woman who belongs to someone else is wrong. My hand hovered for a long moment, but I didn't reach for the papers. A manager's schedule is too demanding. After I get married, I want a quieter life, I added. I'll ensure a smooth transition for all my duties. I'm sorry, Ms. Ashworth. With nothing more to be said, Isabella stopped pressing. I understand, she said softly. I wish you happiness in your marriage. By the time I left the studio, she was already lost in her music again. To her, I was likely just the most competent employee she'd ever had. That day, I sat in the break room, staring at a concert photo of her on the wall. And for the first time, I let my mind go completely blank. Usually, I was too busy to even grab a sip of water, juggling her performance schedules and managing her personal life. I had to be reachable 24/7, ready to be there at a moment's notice for any request, doing the work of 3 people. Of course, she paid me handsomely. I'd managed to buy an apartment in New York City thanks to her. Mark had to call my name a few times before I snapped out of it. Davis, Ms. Ashworth wants you to head over to the venue and get things ready for the party tonight. The party was to celebrate Olivia Vance's return from Juilliard. The guest list was a who's who of Isabella's inner circle. They were the city's young elite, born with silver spoons and an air of superiority. A circle like that is usually exclusive, but I was just too good at my job to be kept out. A manager who could read a room and execute a flawless event was a rare commodity. The moment I arrived at the venue, I dove into the preparations. I handled every detail, from the vintage of the wine and the placement of the silverware to the dietary restrictions of every single guest. Swap the champagne for sparkling water. Mr. Peterson is sober now. Turn the thermostat up a few degrees. Mr. Wallace gets cold easily. And make sure we have that aged oolong tea ready. Ms. Hayes loves it. As evening fell, the guests began to arrive. Olivia Vance was the first one there, greeting me as she walked in. When is Isabella getting here? I checked my watch and gave a careful reply. She's still in rehearsal at Carnegie Hall. She should be here in about an hour. She sank into a leather sofa, her face pale and exhaustion showing in her eyes. I had a waiter lower the music and brought her a cashmere blanket. It's a chilly autumn night. Get some rest. It'll be a while before everyone else arrives. She took the blanket, a playful smile on her face. You should quit working for Isabella and come be my estate manager. I'll double your salary. In a world full of sycophants, my professional, composed demeanor stood out. I chuckled. Well, thank you for the offer, Ms. Vance. It's good to know I have a safety net if I ever find myself out of a job. As the night grew darker, the venue filled with light and laughter as the rest of the guests arrived. Isabella made her entrance in a black evening gown, moving with an elegance that was both graceful and coolly distant. I took her coat, thinking to myself that this might be the last time I would ever do this for her. After a few drinks had been served, I found the right moment to make my announcement. Raising my glass, I spoke sincerely. I want to thank all of you for your kindness over the years. I hope our paths cross again. A brief silence fell over the table until Chloe raised her glass. Honestly, Davis, at first we all thought you had a thing for Isabella. Looks like we were wrong. Everyone knew exactly what she meant. Isabella's last few male managers had all been fired for confessing their feelings for her. She eventually switched to only hiring female managers. But even then, a male assistant slipped her a love letter, which became a running joke. Someone at the table quipped, "I guess someone actually can resist Isabella's charms, after all." Isabella took an elegant sip of her wine and let out a small, dismissive laugh. How boring. After the meal, a smaller group gathered for drinks. Olivia casually asked Isabella, "I hear Ethan Hamilton is quite taken with you." My hand froze, the bottle of wine hovering over Isabella's glass. After a moment, she replied with an air of indifference, "It's just a family arrangement. Marrying him is no different than marrying anyone else." In their world, marriage was a transaction, a merger of interests. Love was an irrelevant luxury. It was clear she had accepted her fate, bowing to the expectations of her family. I'd met Ethan Hamilton. He was a rising star in the finance world, young and successful, a perfect match on paper. I wished so desperately that Isabella could have a different story, but reality was rarely so kind. The party lasted late into the night, and one by one, the guests were picked up by their waiting drivers. Only Isabella's driver had been delayed by an emergency, so the two of us stood alone at the entrance, our shadows stretching long under the streetlights. These moments alone were the most dangerous, when all the feelings I kept bottled up threatened to overflow. But Isabella just stood there quietly, the wine softening her usual cool demeanor. It wasn't long before her car pulled up. Isabella turned to me. "Need a ride?" I shook my head, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you, Ms. Ashworth, but my fiancée is on her way to pick me up." She simply nodded and slipped gracefully into the car. Finally, I was alone. I loosened my tie and leaned against the edge of a large stone planter. Suddenly, I was unsure of where to go or what to do. An unexpected autumn drizzle began to fall, the fine, cold mist soaking into the fabric of my suit. I stood on the curb waiting for a ride, knowing it was nearly impossible to hail a cab in this upscale neighborhood. Due to road construction, her driver had to take a detour. Isabella was surprised to see Davis again. He was standing in the rain, his suit jacket draped over his arm, looking utterly dejected. She froze for a second. She had never seen her meticulously professional manager look so disheveled. At work, he was always in a perfectly pressed suit, his tie knotted just so. She'd met countless men who tried too hard to be charming, loosening their ties to hint at their collarbones, all calculated moves to get her attention. But Davis was different. It was his sheer competence and his perfect, respectful distance that had made her keep him on for all these years. As the car was about to pass him, the driver asked, "Should we offer Mr. Miller a ride?" Isabella's expression was unreadable. "No, keep going," she said flatly. She already had a poor impression of this so-called fiancé who was taking so long to arrive. Davis was brilliant at his job, but his judgment in his personal life seemed questionable. Still, it was his business, not hers to meddle in. For a second, I thought I saw Isabella's car drive past, but it was gone in a flash. It was probably just my imagination. You rarely saw anyone walking in a neighborhood like this. The rain had soaked through my clothes, and my legs were numb by the time I finally found a taxi. It was late when I got back to my apartment, and the silence was suffocating. I always told people I had a wonderful family, a fiancé I adored, and a wide circle of close friends. Everyone always said my life was perfect, something to be envied. The truth was I had nothing. No family, no lover, no friends. When I was in middle school, my father was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. The cancer came back not long after his surgery. Then one ordinary morning, my mother walked out the door and never came back. She took every penny we had, leaving me alone with my dying father. After she left, my father became unerringly calm. He continued his treatments quietly, and on the rare good days, he'd even cook for me. I came home from school one day to find a table laden with food. My dad sat across from me, a gentle smile on his face. A strange sense of dread washed over me. The food smelled wrong. Then I saw the new bottle of pesticide in the kitchen, and I realized that even a dying man could find a terrifying strength enough to hold me down. During a violent coughing fit, I broke free from his grasp and scrambled frantically up to the roof. My father followed, tears streaming down his face as he reached for me. His voice choked with sobs. "Son, this world is too cruel. I can't leave you to face it by yourself. Come with me," he pleaded. "We could be father and son again in the next life." My vision blurred with tears. I was so tired, and I just wanted to smell the familiar scent of tobacco on his clothes one last time. Maybe it would be better this way. There was no hope left for me anyway. On that wind-swept roof, his arms were the only warmth I felt. He held my hand tightly as he led me closer and closer to the edge. In the very last second, just as we were about to go over, a pair of slender but powerful hands grabbed hold of me. She held on for dear life, refusing to let go no matter how much I struggled. As we swayed in the wind, all I could remember were her eyes, shining with fierce determination. I survived. My father did not. The person who saved me was Isabella Ashworth. She didn't just save my life. She gave me a reason to live it, to repay her. I was drowning in guilt over my father, and she was the lifeline I desperately clung to. Isabella was my beacon of hope. When the first responders arrived, I was still clutching her hand. I looked up at her and asked, "How can I ever thank you?" The 14-year-old Isabella looked down at me and said with complete seriousness, "You can find me later." From the night I lost my father, my life felt frozen. Isabella was the only thing that propelled me forward. Tonight, I woke up from the same nightmare again, reliving that horrible day. In my dream, my father asked me why I left him behind, and the cold, indifferent look in my mother's eyes as she left still burned. I woke up drenched in a cold sweat, my throat so raw I couldn't speak. The thermometer read 101.8. Normally, I would have popped some Tylenol and gone to work as if nothing was wrong. This time, however, I decided to call in sick. I needed a rest and figure out what to do with my life. When Isabella arrived at the studio, she learned that Davis had called in sick. She frowned, and her already low opinion of his fiancée sank even lower. Leo, his temporary replacement, brought her a cup of rose tea. Isabella took an elegant sip, her expression unchanged. The tea was weaker than she liked, but she said nothing, simply setting the cup down and leaving it untouched. She made a mistake during her morning rehearsal, a rare occurrence. Thankfully, she knew the piece so well that she recovered quickly, avoiding a major issue. The studio was a little too warm, and the constant hum of the humidifier did nothing for her dry throat. The entire day felt off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something was definitely missing. For the first time, Isabella found herself truly thinking about Davis. She rarely paid him much direct attention, precisely because he was so discreet and seamless in his work. He managed everything with a quiet perfection, like a gentle spring rain that nourishes everything without being noticed. It was as if he wasn't there at all, yet his absence made everything feel wrong. She frowned. That was the second time she'd thought that today. It was all the fault of Davis's fiancée, who had stolen her most capable right-hand man. I spent the entire day tossing and turning, unable to figure out my next move. I felt like a lost moth, fluttering in the dark with no direction. The next morning, I went back to the studio out of habit. As I walked in, Leo approached me nervously. "MS. Ashworth is in a terrible mood," he whispered. "She hasn't even touched her favorite rose tea." The cup from yesterday was still on the windowsill. I picked it up, smelled it, and turned to Leo. "It needs exactly 6 fresh rosebuds. The water has to be 175 degrees, and you steep it for precisely 3 minutes. Not a second more, not a second less." I carefully showed him the entire process, and he watched, taking mental notes. Just as the floral scent filled the room, Isabella walked in. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of softness in her eyes as she looked at me, and a slightest, almost imperceptible pout on her lips. The handover was far more complicated than I'd anticipated. I was responsible for so much that it was impossible to transfer it all quickly. Besides, Isabella's standards were exacting. Every tiny detail of her personal and professional life required meticulous attention. I ended up creating a detailed manual, covering everything from the precise temperature of her studio to the specific designers for her performance gowns. The process took much longer than the month I planned, which meant I was still around for the one event I was desperate to avoid, accompanying Ethan Hamilton to the Ashworth family estate. I felt a profound sense of guilt facing her fiancé, even though I'd never acted on my feelings for Isabella. They were there, and they made me feel like a traitor. Ethan was the picture of success in a bespoke suit, a Patek Philippe on his wrist, and not a single hair out of place. I put on my professional smile and approached him. "Mr. Hamilton, Ms. Ashworth sent me to collect you." On the drive over, Ethan asked a lot of questions about Isabella. It was understandable, being engaged to a practical stranger. Sensing his nerves, I offered some gentle reassurance. "Ms. Ashworth is a very kind person. You have nothing to worry about. And please, feel free to ask me if you have any questions at all." He shot me a grateful look. We made small talk the rest of the way to the estate, and I planned to leave as soon as I dropped him off. But the family matriarch, Mrs. Ashworth, stopped me at the door. She was a formidable figure in the classical music world, an iron lady who, even in her 70s, had eyes that could see right through you. "Davis, where's Isabella?" So Isabella hadn't shown up. I kept my expression neutral and chose my words carefully. There was a last-minute change to her rehearsal schedule. "She may be a little late." The old woman just snorted and ordered me to go and get her. I had once seen her force Isabella to practice for 6 hours straight, until her fingertips bled. The faint scars were still there. I called Isabella's phone the moment I left the house. Thank God, she picked up on the third try. I anxiously asked where she was, but she was silent for a long moment before finally saying my name. "Davis." Her voice was slurred, like she'd been drinking, and I could hear the faint sound of a piano in the background. I knew instantly where she was. When I rushed into the bar, I found her leaning against the grand piano, several empty whiskey glasses on the lid. Her dark hair was spilling over her shoulders in the dim light. She heard my footsteps and looked up, her eyes hazy but still holding their characteristic coolness. "You're here," she said, more sober than she sounded. "Give me a minute." She patted the piano bench beside her. "Sit with me." The Ashworth Concert Hall was an architectural marvel in the heart of the city, a beacon of classical European elegance. Isabella suddenly broke the silence. "Do you think it's beautiful?" My eyes were still fixed on the perfect line of her profile, and without thinking, I breathed, "Beautiful." I flushed, but thankfully she didn't seem to notice. She continued speaking, more to herself than to me. "All this splendor is just decoration on a cage. A gilded stage can imprison a real soul." She said it with a smile, but her tone was dead serious. I'd heard rumors that the Ashworth music empire wasn't built on entirely legal foundations, that there were backroom deals they were only now trying to clean up. For 10 years, I'd watched her climb to the very top of the classical music world. I knew the struggles and the pressure she endured that no one else ever saw. I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Are you happy?" The word happy seemed to hang on her lips for a moment before she let out a soft, humorous laugh. Avoiding the question, she looked right at me and said, "Your fiancé isn't good enough for you." I froze. She immediately looked down. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said that." She finished the last of her drink and stood up, instantly resuming her persona as the elegant, untouchable pianist. All the way back, I kept turning her words over and over in my mind. I couldn't make sense of it, just like I never understood why she, of all people, had been on the roof of that rundown apartment building all those years ago. But it didn't matter anymore. I was leaving. Soon we'd be worlds apart, and I would likely never see her again. It was raining on my last day, a hard, driving rain that hammered against the pavement as if trying to wash everything away. I sat in my small office off the main studio, quietly packing my things. I had spent the better part of a decade in this office, growing from a clueless kid into a seasoned professional. I knew that at 3 o'clock every afternoon, the sun would hit the Steinway Grand just right. I knew that if you stood in just the right corner of the studio, you could hear the soft sound of her breathing as she played. These small, stolen moments have been my greatest comfort. Now it was time to let them go. My debt was paid 10 years of my life. From now on, Ethan Hamilton would be the one to look after her. Leo watched me pack, his eyes red. I ruffled his hair and forced a smile. Hey, it's not goodbye forever. We'll see each other around. Deep down, I knew it was a lie. This was goodbye. This city held too many painful memories for me. I needed a fresh start. A small part of me hoped to see her one last time before I left, but she never appeared. After I left, I holed up in my apartment and slept for what felt like days, trying to catch up on a decade of exhaustion. I bought a bottle of whiskey and blasted music on my speakers. It was one of Isabella's recordings. I started laughing, a wild, unhinged sound. When the laughter died, I just sat on the floor, staring blankly at the stacks of sheet music that filled the room. When I was a kid, my only wish was to stay alive, believing that if I just held on, my dad wouldn't jump. After he was gone, my wish was to work hard enough to pull my mom out of her despair. And then my mom left, too. So I poured everything I had into my work, into Isabella's career. But now I was completely lost, with no idea where to go or what to do. As I was drifting in my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, and my heart stopped. It was Isabella. I scrambled to open the door, only then realizing what a mess I must look. It was too late to shut the door, so I forced a professional smile and invited her in, trying to hide my unease. In contrast to my flustered state, Isabella was her usual picture of elegance. I tried calling, she said softly. There's a last-minute change to tonight's program, and I can't find the backup files. I was in the neighborhood. I fought to keep my heart from pounding out of my chest, keeping my face a professional mask. Of course, Ms. Ashworth, please have a seat. I'll find them for you. As I searched for the files, Isabella sat sipping the tea I'd made her, her eyes following my every move. Her intense gaze made me clumsy, and the more I rushed, the more elusive the documents became. There's no rush, Isabella said quietly. Then she asked, Don't you live with your fiancé, Davis? Panicked, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. She's working late tonight. After what felt like an eternity, I finally found everything she needed and handed it to her. As she took the folder, her eyes lingered on my face for a long moment, and her gaze made my heart race. I was about to say something, but she cut me off with a knowing smile. I'm getting married. I need someone reliable to plan the wedding. I was hoping you'd be willing to help. Same salary, of course. I have never been able to say no to her. My body agreed before my brain could protest. I just nodded, watching her elegant form, 1,000 unspoken words dying in a single silent sigh. And just like that, I was back on her team, in charge of planning her wedding. Maybe seeing her get married would be the thing that finally allowed me to let go. My guilt over Ethan drove me to make every detail perfect. I was determined to give Isabella the wedding of her dreams. But Isabella herself was strangely absent, rarely asking about the arrangements. All communication went through me, as if she were intentionally keeping everyone at arm's length. It was as if it wasn't her wedding at all, but some formal ceremony that barely concerned her. Ethan grew more and more somber. One day, during his tuxedo fitting, he looked at me hesitantly. Could you ask her if she's coming today? It wasn't my place to make that call, but seeing the look on Ethan's face, I dialed her number. I could hear a lot of noise in the background, and Isabella's voice sounded exhausted when she answered. I almost hung up, but then I pictured Ethan's hopeful expression. I chose my words carefully. The wedding gown has been delivered. Would you like to come see it? After a long pause, she said quietly, All right, come and get me. I didn't understand why she wanted me to pick her up, but I did as she asked. When I got to the club, it was empty except for her, standing by the window, lost in thought. I approached quietly. Ms. Ashworth. She turned suddenly, and for a second, I saw an emotion in her eyes I couldn't decipher. It made me freeze in my tracks. Just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by her usual cool composure, making me think I'd imagined it. I helped her into the car. She was silent the entire ride, her eyes closed as if shutting out the world. I caught glimpses of her exquisite profile in the rearview mirror. It was a rare chance to look at her so openly, and I couldn't help but steal a few glances. The thought of Ethan brought a fresh wave of guilt, and I forced my eyes back to the road, muttering a silent prayer. Suddenly, a feeling of deep unease washed over me. I've always trusted my gut, and my mind started racing. Something was wrong. A black SUV had been on our tail for the last half hour, keeping the exact same distance. "Ms. Ashworth," I said, trying to wake her. "Isabella," but she was fast asleep in the back. I had no choice but to speed up. The SUV immediately matched my pace. We were racing along the winding upstate road. Their car was clearly modified. No matter how fast I went, they stayed right on my bumper. Then they swerved and slammed directly into us. The impact sent our car spinning out of control. It rolled across the pavement, and only a last-second jerk of the wheel kept us from going over the cliff. My vision swam with red, my head spinning. I struggled to pull myself out of the driver's seat. Isabella was pinned in the back, awake now, trying to move but trapped by the twisted metal frame. I grabbed the jack from the trunk and tried to use it as a lever, but the door was too badly damaged. It wouldn't move an inch. Gas was leaking from the ruptured tank, and I could see smoke starting to curl up in the back seat. The danger made my mind crystal clear. All that mattered was getting Isabella out. The fire was spreading, and the car could blow any second. Isabella looked up at me. "I don't pay you enough to die for me," she said, her voice strained. "Davis, get out of here. It's going to explode." My nerves were already shot, and her talking was making it worse. "Shut up," I yelled, unable to stop myself. She actually smiled at that. I didn't have time to wonder why. The fire was getting bigger. Blood dripped from a gash on my arm. I gritted my teeth and pulled with every ounce of strength I had, finally dragging her free of the wreckage. I got her to her feet, and we stumbled away from the car, one painful step at a time. We hadn't gotten far when the car exploded behind us, a fireball that lit up the night sky in a terrifying shade of red. I've never been more grateful for all those hours at the gym. Without that strength, we'd both be dead. The sound of sirens grew closer, and a wave of exhaustion crashed over me. My vision started to go dark. Isabella regained consciousness first. She remembered the moment of impact, remembered him wrenching the steering wheel, taking the brunt of the crash himself. She stared at the man in the hospital bed, feeling as if she were seeing him for the first time. Isabella had known too much betrayal in her life. She still remembered the kidnapping when she was a child, when her own father had left her behind to save himself. Her screams and pleas had been answered by the sound of a heavy iron door slamming shut. Her mother had sworn she would always be there for her, but in the end, she had chosen a piano wire and a final, silent exit. So many people had drifted in and out of her life, and every single one had eventually left. She was used to being alone, and yet this man, the one who had the most reason to run, had stayed. She prided herself on being able to read people, but she couldn't get a read on him at all. What was he thinking? What did he want? I woke up feeling like I was surfacing from a deep, hazy dream, and the first thing I saw was Isabella staring at me with intense focus. My chest tightened. Had she figured it out? Her gaze was piercing as our eyes met, and I could feel sweat beading on my palms. "Why did you save me?" she asked. My mind raced, and a second later, I forced a smile. "I'm a gambler, Ms. Ashworth. Having a world-famous pianist owe you her life. That's not a card everyone gets to play." Isabella frowned, her eyes searching my face, weighing my words. "What do you want?" In her world, the person who asked for nothing was the most dangerous. A clear price tag was something she could understand and trust. I thought hard about what I could ask for that would equal the debt of life, and finally came up with an answer that would put her at ease. "I want the exclusive rights to manage your next album. That should be enough to set me up for life." I saw the tension in her shoulders relax and knew I'd said the right thing. She gave a small laugh. "An album is so intangible. How about a music conservatory in Midtown instead?" I smiled back. A multi-million-dollar conservatory? In that case, thank you, Ms. Ashworth. It was a clean transaction. Now she wouldn't have to feel indebted to me. She stood up. Then get some rest, Davis. You don't need to worry about the engagement party anymore. I was in the hospital for a full week. The day I was discharged was the day of Isabella's engagement party. Every entertainment outlet was covering the grand union of the Ashworth and Hamilton families. The lavish concert hall was decorated like a fairy tale, with crystal chandeliers casting a dazzling glow. This was supposed to be the end of the story. We would go our separate ways. But I couldn't shake the heavy feeling in my chest. I wandered the streets aimlessly until I found myself walking into a quiet bar. For years, I've been the one who stayed sober to clean up everyone else's messes. I rarely let myself drink. I ordered a whiskey, and the burn as it went down made me wince. They say you drink to forget your sorrows, but the bitter taste just brought tears to my eyes. They fell into the glass, mixing with the amber liquid. As my consciousness began to fade, I managed to pull out my phone and order an Uber, telling the driver to make sure I got home safe. At her engagement party, Isabella received an unexpected call. It was from Davis. It gave her the perfect excuse to escape the suffocating, artificial ceremony. When she arrived at the bar, the Uber driver rushed up to her. "He's really drunk, ma'am." He couldn't tell me his address, so I just called the last number in his phone. He looked at Isabella nervously. "You're not his boss, are you? I hope I don't get in trouble for this." Isabella took Davis's arm, steadying him. "Don't worry," she said in a calm voice. "I'll take it from here." She helped him out of the bar. He was behaving like a willful child, one moment reaching out to touch her cheek, the next playfully messing up her hair. Isabella had never seen him so unguarded. She decided to test him. "Why did you stay with me for so long?" He seemed to think about it for a moment, his expression hazy. Then a guileless smile spread across his face. "To repay a debt." "What debt?" she asked. "You saved my life," he mumbled. Isabella pressed on. "And how are you planning to repay me?" "By giving her everything wonderful in this world." "Why go to such lengths?" "Because I love her." Isabella had taken psychology courses at Juilliard. She knew how to ask questions, how to peel back the layers. She had been searching for a logical reason, but instead, she found this. He loved her. Davis loved her. Isabella studied his drunken face. His smile was so open, so genuine. There was no lie in it. Countless men had professed their love for her over the years. She'd seen every kind of affection, from fiery passion to quiet devotion. But she had never encountered a love like this, one kept so perfectly hidden for so many years. So many things suddenly made sense. Why his apartment had shown no signs of a fiancé, no trace of another woman at all. She fell deep into thought. Could she trust a love like this? A heart so devoted it would face death without a second thought. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache, the ghost of a dream still clinging to me. The only thing I could remember clearly was the image of Isabella's bright, star-like eyes. Why was I still dreaming of her? It was wrong to fantasize about another man's fiancée. For the next few months, I avoided all entertainment news. I took trains across the country, just traveling, seeing new cities. I started visiting shelters and community centers, making donations to single-parent families who were struggling. I often wondered if things would have been different for my mother if someone had just offered her a little help. There's so much pain in the world, all I could do was my small part. Then one day, a shocking headline broke through my self-imposed exile. Isabella Ashworth was retiring from music. The article featured a photo of her and Ethan, ripped down the middle, with a bold headline: Ashworth-Hamilton engagement off. Piano prodigy quits the stage. I was frantic. I called Ethan immediately. His voice was full of resignation. "Davis, it was a business decision, a family decision. Our personal feelings didn't matter. There was nothing I could do." After I calmed down and thought about it, the pieces started to fit together. This had to be Isabella's plan all along, her grand exit. For years, I'd seen how exhausted she was beneath the glamorous facade, how suffocated she was by the gilded cage of her fame. I tried to talk to her about it subtly, but she always deflected. It was clear now she'd been planning her escape all along. I thought back to that night in the bar, how vulnerable she'd seemed. For her, the spotlight was just another kind of prison. Right now, she needed someone to be her rock, just as she had been for me on that rooftop. It didn't have to be me. She just needed someone to give her strength. The thought had barely formed before I was on my way to her studio. The building, once always lit and full of life, was now dark and silent. She had used the last of her money to give her staff their severance. I walked down the silent hallway and pushed open the studio door. Isabella was sitting alone at the piano, shrouded in shadows. The wind billowed the curtains, playing a lonely melody. She looked up at me, her eyes deep and unreadable, holding a world of unspoken thoughts. I slowly reached out and took her hand in mine. All the speeches I'd rehearsed in my head vanished at the simple warmth of her touch. In that moment, all I wanted was to hold her hand, to give her the same strength she had once given me. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, the brilliant pianist who had been crushed by the demands of the family, eventually becoming a tragic footnote in the industry. The Ashworths had tried to mold a pure artist into a commercial product, forcing her to play games, to network, to compromise her integrity. Everyone had played a part in pushing her mother to the breaking point. The critics said she didn't have the business sense for the world she was in. But what if the world itself was the problem? The Ashworth empire was still propped up by illegal copyright schemes. Her mother had discovered the corruption and tried to expose it, but she had been silenced, buried under a mountain of lies. Isabella had planned to dismantle it all herself, quietly letting the darkness die with her. But then Davis showed up. Was it because of love? She had seen him the moment he arrived. While everyone else was packing to leave, he was walking toward her against the tide. Through a sea of scattered sheet music, he looked like a knight from a fairy tale, coming to rescue his princess. The thought made Isabella smile. How could anyone be so foolishly earnest? He walked right up to her and took her hand, and a steady warmth spread from his palm into hers. It was only then that Isabella realized how cold her own hands were. She squeezed his hand back. In the middle of this storm, his warmth was the only real thing she had to hold on to. I stayed with Isabella as she dismantled her studio. During one press conference, angry fans threw eggs at her. The Ashworth name had too many secrets tied to it, and the public needed someone to blame. It was a price she had to pay. The day Isabella made her official announcement, her grandfather had a stroke and was hospitalized. That night, she asked me to meet her for a drink. It turned out to be at her private studio. I hesitated at the door. I'm not sure this is appropriate. We weren't exactly on getting drunk together terms. The intimacy of it made me nervous. Isabella's head was bowed, and she looked utterly defeated. I could hear a catch in her voice. Had she been crying? He was still her family, after all. My heart ached for her. I took the bottle from her, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. What the hell? I could have one drink with her. Enduring things was my specialty. I'd never seen Isabella look like this. Her black dress was rumpled, her hair was a mess, and she looked so fragile, as if she might just dissolve into the night. She was always so poised, so perfect, the elegant center of attention wherever she went. Tonight, she looked like a fallen angel. In her drunken haze, she kept murmuring my name over and over, demanding I answer each time. Her voice was thick and sweet with alcohol, and every time she said my name, my heart hammered against my ribs. She suddenly leaned in until our faces were only inches apart. The moonlight caught on her long lashes, casting delicate shadows on her cheeks. "Davis," she whispered, "will you always be with me?" I didn't answer right away. Forever is a long time, a promise no one can truly make. Besides, I was just her employee. But she was insistent, demanding an answer like a stubborn child. I had no choice but to whisper, "Yes, I'll always be here." That seemed to satisfy her. She grew quiet, just watching me with a small frown, as if trying to figure something out. Then she complained of being hot and brushed her hair aside, exposing the pale, delicate skin of her neck. The gesture was unconsciously seductive. I had never thought of Isabella in that way before. I froze for a second, then quickly looked away. But she kept inching closer, and I could feel my face getting hot. It was a cold winter night, but suddenly the room felt stifling. I forced myself to create some distance between us. She gave me a confused look before she started drinking again, not stopping until she finally passed out. Right before she passed out, she looked at me, and there was something in her eyes that looked like encouragement. Encouragement for what? I got her settled and went home, but I lay awake all night trying to figure it out. She called the next day to thank me for taking care of her. I just laughed and said, "It's my job, Miss Ashworth." There was a pause on the other end, and then she said, her voice tight with frustration, "Davis, you are so." Then she hung up, leaving me completely confused. With the studio gone, there was no reason for us to see each other anymore. Days went by. Then one night, there was a knock on my door. It was Isabella, drunk again. The moment I opened the door, she collapsed into my arms. I managed to get her to the sofa. I tried to pull away, but she grabbed my wrist, pulling me off balance. I stumbled and fell right on top of her. Our faces were inches apart. She stared into my eyes and whispered my name, Davis. It was just my name, but the way she said it sent a shiver through me. I could see myself reflected in her eyes, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. Our breaths mingled. I leaned closer, drawn by an invisible force, until our lips met. In that instant, every ounce of my self-control, every bit of the restraint I'd practiced for 10 years, simply melted away. At dawn, I fled like a coward. I was halfway down the block before I remembered it was my own apartment. I ended up wandering the neighborhood until dusk before sneaking back and quietly turning the doorknob. The lights flipped on, blinding me. Isabella was sitting there, one eyebrow arched. So, was this just a one-night stand? I stood frozen in the doorway, trapped. "Come here," she said. "We need to talk." I opened my mouth to try and explain, to say it was a mistake, but she held up a hand to stop me. "You've never been good at this part, so let me talk." Her expression was more serious than I had ever seen it, and my heart leaped into my throat. "Davis, you've always put me on a pedestal, but I'm just a person. I have desires. I fall in love. I get jealous. I wanted to argue, but she kept going. I know you're probably not thinking clearly right now, and it's unfair of me to force you into a decision. But I'm more afraid that if I give you time to think, you'll see me for who I really am, and you won't love me anymore. I don't care if it's gratitude or hero worship or something else. You've woken something up in me, and you don't get to just walk away." She pulled a glittering diamond ring from her pocket, her eyes shining. "Davis Miller, will you take a chance on a life with me?" My mind was completely blank. I heard myself say yes. Before I knew it, she was sliding the ring onto my finger. "Do you have your ID on you?" she asked. I nodded numbly. A soft, beautiful smile spread across her face. "Then let's go." "Go where?" "City Hall." As the sun began to set, we walked out of the county clerk's office with our marriage license in hand, the last couple to be married that day. The sunset painted the sky in fiery shades of orange and red. And for the first time in my life, all my anxiety, all my confusion finally had a home.